What's up? I'm back for another makeup and a ghost story. Hope you guys are ready for another one. Today I am going to be talking about a family who moved into a small, seemingly innocuous house in Gary, Indiana, and ended up having their whole lives turned completely upside down. So this is the story of the Gary, Indiana Demon House. So in the fall of 2011, Latoya Ammons, her mother Rosa, and Latoya's 3 children, a girl and 2 boys, moved into what seemed like a quiet house on a relatively quiet street in Gary, Indiana. Which, I mean, is all around pretty nice because Gary isn't known for being all that quiet. So in terms of places for a family to live, this house and this particular neighborhood seemed like a good place for the family to be. And I mean, for all intents and purposes, it was. Until a few months later, when started to hit the fan. Latoya said that it didn't take long for paranormal and just odd phenomena to start happening around the house. The first being that masses of flies began accumulating right outside their house's door. Now, most people might be like, flies happen, that's really not that big of a deal, except that it was right before Christmas time, and flies right before Christmas is kind of freaking weird. It's kind of especially weird when you live in Gary, Indiana, where the temperatures are sub-freezing, and flies should not be living in that sort of. Beyond that, it seemed like whatever they tried to do, Rosa and Latoya could not get these flies to go away. It didn't matter what kind of traps they set out, how many flies they swatted and killed, whatever. There were just still masses and masses and masses of flies gathering at their doorstep. Ugh. But here's where it gets weird. And you guys, I have to preface this by saying, not everything has a history that you can go back and verify and make sure that it's true. In some instances, you have to decide for yourself whether you think a story is true or whether you think that it's super suspicious and you just can't get on board with it. That being said, we'll continue. So one night, Rosa and Latoya claim to have been in the living room by themselves, and they hear footsteps coming from the basement. The footsteps reach the top of the basement stairs. Latoya and Rosa hear what sounds like the door from the basement to the kitchen open. And at this point, they're so scared that they run into their bedrooms. Latoya and Rosa both say that they're too scared to call the authorities, which makes zero sense to me because if I've got a house full of children, the first thing I'm going to do if I think there is an intruder in the house is call the cops. And yet, Latoya and Rosa say that they think there's an intruder in the house, and so they hide in their bedrooms until morning. Morning comes, and Latoya feels like it's safe to leave her bedroom. She goes out and inspects the house, where she finds no evidence of there ever having been someone in the house other than them. And that pretty much closes that whole part of the situation. I mean, you guys, they just let it go. They didn't do any further inspections. They never called the police. They just let that go. Now, Rosa and Latoya do claim that after that instance, the sound of footsteps got louder and more violent, as did the sound of opening doors, until eventually it got to the point where it sounded like somebody was pounding on walls. And at one point, Rosa does claim that she heard a dog growl inside the house and they had no pets. On another night, Rosa had been sleeping on the living room couch and claims to have been awoken by somebody in the living room pacing back and forth. At which point, she says she saw a dark shadow of a man in the living room. Yet again, you guys, and I wish I was making up, she ran to her bedroom but never called the authorities. So we're found yet again with another instance in which these women believe that there is an intruder in the house, but have not called the police to check it out. Again, they wait until morning, see that there's no evidence of anyone having been in the house. In fact, all the doors and windows are locked from the inside. However, they claim that there are wet footprints in the middle of the living room floor. Now, you guys, I told you this was some shady business. At no point did these women call the cops. Again, I say, if I think there is some stranger screwing around in my house, I'm getting on the horn and calling the old capos, because no way. No. And yet, for the sake of the story, I'm gonna keep going. So on March 10th, 2012, LaToya, Rosa, her 3 children, and a bunch of their family and friends were gathering at their house due to a death in their family. During the course of the night, Rosa's daughter claims that an invisible entity tried to pull her off of the couch. Now, tell me something, if you don't mind. How on earth did a room full of people not see this occur? I don't get it. At another point during the night, her son was supposedly slammed into the freezer in the next room. But no, you guys, that was not enough to clear the house, because alas, they sent the children to bed in their own rooms later that evening. And what transpired from there sounds like it's straight out of the movie Exorcist. See, the boys were in bed in their room, and Rosa's daughter was asleep in her room with her cousin, while the rest of the adults in the family continued their conversation out in the living room. And suddenly, there was a loud scream from the girls' bedroom, at which point Rosa makes her way back to check on the girls. And when she turns on the light, she just happens to catch a glimpse of her granddaughter levitating in midair, still asleep, before she drops back onto the bed. Now, I'd like to think that the most reasonable of us would be like, thanks but no thanks, and go ahead and scurry out of the house at this point. But LaToya and her family stay, despite the fact that the rest of LaToya's family want nothing to do with the house and refuse to ever set foot in it ever again. They're smart people. But at least I can say this for Rosa and LaToya. At this point, they are indeed sufficiently freaked out. So they do go to some local churches and try to enlist the help of priests. Now, unfortunately for them, most of the people working in the churches think they're absolutely cuckoo and think that whatever they're seeing is hallucinations, or that they're just completely fabricating the stories altogether. Their luck finally did change when they found a small local church where the priest was willing to listen to them, but all he did was tell them to cleanse the house with some bleach and ammonia, which I hope they did separately, because if you mix the two, doesn't that make like mustard gas or something? I mean, yee. And then draw some crosses on the windows and doors and anoint themselves, which just all in all didn't work. So the 2 women called in 2 clairvoyants, at which point the word demon finally enters the picture. See, what the 2 clairvoyants told LaToya and Rosa was that the house was infested with at least 200 demons. Yeah, you heard that right. 200 demons. And that they needed to get the children out of the house immediately. However, having nowhere to go, they needed to go with Plan B. Now, Plan B was something that the clairvoyants cooked up, which was essentially making a makeshift altar in the basement and then having LaToya go through the house with some sage and reading from Psalms and basically blessing the house herself, which both LaToya and Rosa said worked for about 3 days until everything got really pissed off inside the house. But Kira, how much worse could this possibly get? Well, let me tell you. After she was done blessing the house, her youngest son started seeing an imaginary friend. And that imaginary friend often coerced him into the closet, where he would frequently tell him about what it felt like to be killed. Middle son often heard voices as well, and those ones told him what it was like to be murdered. More fallout. See it? More fallout. I hate that. And the daughter also heard voices, but those ones often told her that she was going to be injured in some way, or that she was going to lose her family, some other just not so nice, disturbing things that would generally cause any child of any sort discomfort. On top of that, there were several instances in which Latoya said that the spirits in the house were injuring her children, one of which caused her daughter to go to the hospital because she required stitches. So finally, out of requirement, because they had no help in the spiritual spectrum, Latoya took her children to a doctor. And while the doctor was absolutely deeply disturbed by what had been going on with the family, he noted that he believed that it was all hallucinations and that the family was mentally disturbed, etc., etc. However, this is when starts to get really weird. It's also the only point in the story where my skepticism starts being tested a bit. Not long after the initial doctor's appointment, Latoya takes them to visit another doctor. Now, according to witness testimony from medical workers in the DCS files, the children began speaking in low growls, baring their teeth, and the youngest child was thrown against the wall by an unseen force. When he was released and dropped back down, both of the boys dropped to the floor and fainted. That's somewhat the f***ery. Now, absolutely, both boys were taken by ambulance to the hospital, where the oldest boy woke up and was totally fine, no problems whatsoever. Upon awaking, though, the youngest boy was in such a rage and acting out so badly that it took 5 men to hold this child down. Now, nobody knows who, but somebody called in a social worker. The social worker arrived. She had checks done on all of the children. All of them were deemed fit, well cared for, that there was nothing wrong with them whatsoever. At the same time, Latoya was given a psychological eval, and everything came back normal with her psychologically. But then, not long after, the youngest child, right in front of the social worker, out of nowhere, begins baring his teeth and lunges at his older brother, grabbing him by the throat and squeezing, just straight up choking this child out. And it took medical staff to get him off of his older brother. So suspicious, the social worker, thinking that the boys might be playing a part for their mother, removes them to a separate room along with their grandmother and a nurse to observe. Now, both the grandmother and the nurse and the social worker attest to this event happening. They all say that while they were in the room with the boys, the youngest boy grabbed onto his grandmother's hand and then threw himself against the wall, where he walked backwards up the wall, onto the ceiling, and down the other side, all while holding his grandmother's hand. Now, according to records, at this point, the nurse ran out of the room, and so did the social worker, because they didn't want any part of whatever the that was. Now, regardless of the insanity that she had just witnessed, the social worker deemed that the children were under great spiritual distress and had the children removed from their mother's care. LaToya says that the spiritual distress was caused by demonic possession, but their presence in the hospital caught the eye of the hospital's chaplain, and he made a call to a priest in the next town over, and he requested that the priest, Father Maginot, perform an exorcism on the young boy. Now, exorcisms are never taken lightly, but Father Maginot was super interested, and he ended up showing up to Gary, Indiana, not long after. He met with LaToya and Rosa and ended up experiencing a lot of the things in the house that the family had said they experienced, which prompted him to go ahead and ask if he could perform the exorcisms that were requested. And eventually, he was granted the permission to perform said exorcisms. However, while in the process of waiting, police came over to check out the house, and they ended up catching on their equipment some different paranormal stuff. Like, one police officer said that the battery in his equipment went low, even though he had just replaced the batteries before he went in. Another police officer said that he ended up catching on his recording devices a disembodied voice saying, "Hey," and a photographer for the police department actually caught mists and figures that looked human that weren't there to their visible eyes, and these figures showed up in several pictures. Now remember, these are not paranormal investigators. These are Gary, Indiana police officers. Now, I do need to add at this point that the children were sent to foster homes because it was found that LaToya was neglecting their education, and they hadn't been to school in quite some time. And it wasn't the first time. She actually stopped sending them to school in 2009 as well. And that was way before they ever entered the Gary, Indiana house. So she had a record of messing with her kids. And that's kind of sus. And it makes me, again, question what was going on in the Gary, Indiana house, because I am very skeptical about stories of this nature. Father Maginot then did come in with another social worker, because the first one was like, "I'm out of here," and some more police officers, where they dug up a patch of dirt below the basement stairs and found some creepy creeperton items about 4 feet below the soil, which Maginot suggests that maybe they were used in some kind of ritual or curse. I don't know. That's enough to get me out of the house. And then, once Father Maginot performed the exorcism, which actually had witnesses, which were some of the cops and the social worker that were with them when they inspected the house, strange things started to happen to those witnesses, including broken bones, accidents, shootings, health problems, just general things that seemed coincidental, but were almost too coincidental to be coincidental, if that makes any kind of sense at all. Now, LaToya did end up getting her kiddos back later in 2012, which, I mean, great. And they did end up getting out of the Gary, Indiana house, also great. But there are still a lot of questions in the story that are unanswered and still a little suspicious. And I'm on the fence about whether I believe the story or not. There were some investigators that went into the house after they left. Some went in and said that they could find absolutely no evidence whatsoever that the house was demonic or haunted or anything like that. Another group went in and said they did capture some EVP evidence. So I guess it's kind of up to you whether you believe it or not. And if you're wondering, the demon house in Gary, Indiana is kaput. It no longer exists. Sometime in the mid-teens, you guessed it, Mr. Zach Bagans bought the house and leveled that shit. So you can't go by it. You can't go in it. There's no touching the demon house anymore. Although I do hear rumors that people still kind of gather at the plot of land where it once existed. Now, you guys, I'm going to use my brand new eyelashes from Lujo Lashes, which are stunning, by the way. I just got them in the mail, and oh my God, are these things fan-freaking-tastic. Let me show them to you in the box before I get them out of the box. They're so full and long. I can't wait to put them on. I'm super excited. So I'm going to put these lashes on, and then I'll be right back with your final look. These are the most fabulous lashes I have ever worn, legitimately. Lujo Lashes, so amazing, so easy to put on. They are so long and full. I feel like I'm blowing my camera away. Hey guys, editing Kira here. By the way, I forgot to mention, if you absolutely love these lashes as much as I do, there is a discount code in the description for this video. Maybe hit it up if you're as much in love with these lashes as I am. Check them out. I'm going to get closer so that you can actually see them a little bit better. I am like in love with these things. I don't know if I ever want to wear another pair of lashes. Oh my God. Anyway, this is our final look, obviously. Do you like it? I'm loving it. Anyway, you guys, I hope that you had a great time this time. I hope you'll come back and see me for another episode. And remember to always love yourself, always be a unicorn. We'll see you next time. Bye!